And we're live.
Hello and welcome to another live demonstration. If you're in the chat, you can say hi or ask any questions. So for this demonstration, I'm going to be painting or drawing, haven't decided what to call it, an orange using oil pastels. The oil pastels I'm using this time are Caran NeoPastels. And like all oil pastels, these are a non-drying pastel. Doesn't mean they don't harden a little over time, but they can still be smudged after a little while, and I'll tell you at the end what to do about that. So this is an orange. I went round a supermarket and they had fabulous oranges with these leaves and stalks on. So great picture, and now I've got a wonderful subject to paint or draw. Like I say, I'm trying to decide what to call it. So oil pastels. Now, there are different levels. You get student quality or you get artist quality. And the artist quality are usually very highly pigmented and really creamy to work with. So I have found using oil pastels that it doesn't actually always matter what colour you put on, because very much like a paint, you can actually blend and mix colour on the page. So this is a bit of grey, because the stalk is a little bit grey, a little bit brown. And I'm putting a bit of brown on. And I'm going to show you what I mean by it doesn't always matter what colour you put on. I'm going to be using stump, and you can see here that I can blend. There's probably not enough pigment on yet, but the pigment I've got on here, the oil pastel I've got on here, can blend to a smooth consistency. And by doing that, it means I can add colour as I go along. I may at the end decide to keep this crayon-like quality, but initially I want a much softer, more painterly effect. So much more on, and like I say very often, it is easier to add colour than it is to take it away. So oil pastels are made from a pigment and a non-drying oil binder and a bit of wax. So they are different to oil bars, which are oil paint in a bar. And I know their popularity is really increasing just because of their versatility. They will go on lots of different surfaces. Excuse me. For this, I'm using a bit of watercolour paper, the SAA practice paper, because I like the texture, and you'll see when I do the body of the orange why I have chosen this. So, a bit of light. Another thing you will see is that actually it's not always easy, because they're quite broad. It's not so easy to get detail, which you can actually take colour from here or scrub this onto a china palette and pick up colour that way, and then you can put it where you want it if you want a much more controlled type of working. But the beauty of the oil pastel is it just goes down really creamy. Big bold marks if you want.
Anita?
Yes.
Paolo's asking about solvents. I know you're not using any today, but you can if you wanted to.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I'm not using solvents because I don't use solvents for anything, basically because I've got an intolerance to them. But yes, you can dissolve the binder a little bit, and then you get them much more painterly, so you can dissolve it with a brush. with solvents. Some people use oil, baby oil. So the thing is that they are very versatile and you can try different mediums alongside them. You can also use them with a watercolour, and they create a resist, a bit like a wax resist. They will create a resist that the water-based paint, like watercolour, skips over. So mixed media, you can get different techniques. So yeah, solvent will make it much more painterly and you can move it with a brush. I tend to not use a solvent, that's just me. Right. Okay, put some colour on. I'm also thinking about where I'm putting the colour first, because if you see me before, you know I tend to skip around. And if I started painting down here, I would end up placing my hand on it. So I'm actually trying to be quite considered about where I'm putting the colour and how I'm moving around the page. I will forget. The chances are quite high I will forget. And because I've got a colour in my hand, I will move around the page. Just put in any of the greens I've got. So this is a set of 24 colours. In the Caran range there's 96, so there's a really big range of colour.
Anita?
Yes.
Another question.
Yes?
It's not pastel related, but Amy's wondering whether you have a least favourite medium to work in.
That's difficult to answer. The reason being, sometimes the subject kind of says and shouts a medium at you. There's some mediums I don't use very often, but because I try and rotate all different mediums as much as possible, it's difficult to say. But very thin oil painting I've never really tried. I do oil painting and it's all in one, the alla prima kind of painting without using solvents, rather than very thin, lots of layers and things that take a little while. That's probably not something I would do. But I can say there's a subject I probably try and avoid, and that's usually landscapes. I do try them, and you'll notice it's usually at the beginning of the year when I have all good intentions of trying more landscapes. And then I'll probably do another one beginning of the next year. Animals, people, they are what I enjoy doing. And I should try and master landscapes a little bit more. And I will do. In fact, I think I'm doing is it classed as a landscape next week?
Oh, it's close, isn't it?
It's close.
Probably a landscape more than anything.
And it's a cityscape, I would say.
Yeah.
But when you see it, you'll see why I've done it. It's more to do with the colour. I just tend to see landscapes as very green. But there is a picture I have on my desk, which is taunting me, because it's a fabulous landscape of the Peak District, I think. And it's sitting there because I keep looking at it. And this is why I'm going on, because you asked my favourite medium. Or I'm looking at this subject I want to paint, but the medium hasn't yet jumped out at me. So do I do it in watercolour, or would it suit acrylics or oils, or pencil, or something else like pastel? So it's sitting there, and I'll get a flash of inspiration, and the medium will come to me. So that was a very interesting question. Thank you for that, Amy. Sorry I can't give a definite answer, but I'm very, very lucky to be able to try so many different mediums, and new and interesting and unusual mediums, that I don't get a chance to say which I like or dislike. because each one has very unique qualities.
I said in the chat that you'd be very diplomatic about it, probably. And,
It's not even diplomatic, it's genuinely, I get asked quite often, and it is a difficult question because I get a chance to try so many. Okay, so you can see here how I'm mixing the greens. I'm looking at, there's no real light on this, but it's got shape, it's got form. The colour may not be exactly the same, and I'm just adding a bit of the pastel and mixing up the greens I have in order to create a good representation of the colour. Dark along the back where there's a ridge, and I'm going to pull that up. It has some texture. Take some of that green into there. Right. Quite like those actually, they work quite quickly, which is always good. Okay. So let's move on to this one. It's darker under here, as the leaf rolls under, and same here. Like I said, if I've got a colour in my hand and I know where it can go, I will tend to jump around the page. There's a little leaf here. A bit of this olive green along this back here. You see the texture there? This is why I've chosen to use the watercolour paper rather than a very smooth paper. That texture is going to be perfect for the orange itself. And I have actually quite a lot of orange facts, which are very interesting. So the orange is actually one of the best known hybrid fruits. So the orange as we know it today came from a mandarin and, what was it called, Gary? It's kind of a grape fruit. Pomero, something like that. And there are now 600 varieties of orange. All pretty much with a mix of the main fruit, mandarin. So we have the mandarin, and it is the key to all the orange varieties we have today. So about 4,000 years ago, orange trees, which are evergreen, grew in Southeast Asia and then kind of moved into India. So it's a fruit that's been around a long time. The Spanish took it over to America in about 1500, but it wasn't until the 1800s where it became commercially grown in states like Florida, which is a big orange state. And you see the fruit, the orange blossom, the white orange blossom is the national flower, and the orange is the national fruit. And you see it on their number plates. Oranges are really useful fruits, not only for as a food source, but their peel can be used as a cleaning agent. They are full of antitoxins, antioxidants, vitamin C. So not only as a food source, but as a cleaning product. There's lots of things to be used for an orange. And one of the biggest debates I was reading about is what came first. Was it orange as a colour or orange as a fruit. Now it does depend on the source you read from, but I'm going with the word orange in the English language. So the word orange has been around to describe the fruit since the 1300s. And it wasn't until the 1500s that orange as a colour was used. So for me, which came first, according to the source I read, will be orange as a fruit. But I know this type of fruit has been known by other names in other countries. Go. I don't know which type of orange this is. But the most popular ones are clementine. So that's because of the little navel you get from the stalk, and the bigger the navel, the sweeter the fruit. So that's the way to tell your fruit. Okay. Still, green, like I say, is for me a difficult colour, but being able to mix these greens to make it look less bright, just move this pigment around. You'll see some of these edges are a bit scruffy at the moment, but I can work on that, I can smooth it. What I am looking for is different texture between the orange, which has got that fabulous skin, and the leaves, which are, they're not smooth, but they again are a different texture. Now, the oil pastels dry to a matte finish, so they have a dull finish. They're not shiny like oils. I think I need that to be a little bit darker, so let's have a look. It comes over here into here. I just love this blending, being able to blend. And you can do as many layers as you want. There may come a saturation point, but as long as you keep layering, and then what you can also do, which I think I'm going to try and do, is you can scrape out. So a bit of sgraffito, just add a little bit of colour so it's not that harsh blue-green. Bit of brown in there, bit of brown. Mixing, it's quite satisfying. Okay, let's go on to this one. So it will depend on the surface you've used, how far the pigment moves. It's being gripped a little bit by this watercolour paper. And so you can see there, not moving it so much, all I'm pretty much doing is blending and softening rather than spreading it across the page.
Anita?
Yes.
Question from me now.
Oh, hello, Gary.
How long will it take to dry?
Oil pastels don't dry.
Right.
They're non-drying. They will harden a little over time, but they have a non-drying oil base, so they can remain smudgy for a long time. They will slightly harden over time, and there are fixatives which, again, slightly harden, but they don't make them completely fixed, completely dry.
Okay. So you'd have to keep it behind glass then, basically.
Yeah, behind glass, or what I do for storage is I use a bit of the crystal paper, and they don't get smudged very easily. It will depend on the surface. Because they're so versatile, they also go on lots of different surfaces. They're fun to use on glass, where they can really smudge and squirm around. And then they will wipe off a little more easily than they will on paper, which grips it. But no, non-drying formula. Actually, I'm quite pleased doing this, because I sometimes find that using this blending, it gets quite contaminated, the end of these blenders, and maybe when I do the orange, it will pick up some green in the orange, and I'll show you what I can do. Pick that down again. The leaves are probably going to be the most work, just because there's no right green, there's no green which fitted the colour. So I'm tending to use a few colours and a lot of blending. Getting onto the orange. The orange is a perfect orange colour. And like we've discussed, the fruit came first in the English language. Colour a little later. Bit of ochre. Now this set's quite good because it actually gives me all the colours I need, but I can also make my own colours. Just a bit of dark under there. Right, I'm going to move on to the orange. Reason being is I can come back to this. So I'm going to put some yellow on and a bit of orange, because it does the job. Look at that, perfect colour. And can you see the texture? That texture I'm hoping to keep. Now, I'm not going over the green. I will push it into, and you'll see what I mean by contamination. It's a little later. Orange is an orangish shape. So this is quite a round one. Okay, right, I'm going bigger now. So you can use something like, this is a colour shaper. This one's a soft, you can see how flexible this is. For me, it was probably a bit too flexible. But you can see how that does blend. Maybe it'll work, let me see. I don't give up on anything. They may sit in the back of the cupboard for a little while, and then you find the perfect use for a tool.
Anita?
Yes.
Another question for you.
Good.
Shirley wants to know, what are the main advantages of oil pastels over soft pastels?
They're totally very different, very different. You've got your dry, so soft pastels are dry. You can use them with a wet technique. These feel really creamy. They're like a paint, so you get a very painterly. They're quite sticky. I can feel the stickiness on my hand. There's no disadvantage or advantage. It's just a different way of working. Dry pastels do need that grippy surface, and they're quite dusty, whereas these are creamy, oily, painterly. They stick to the surface can be smudged and then not fully drying, whereas soft pastels are a dry medium. It totally depends on what you're looking for, because the surfaces, the thing about oil pastels is they go on pretty much any surface. They go on wood, they go on glass, plastic, paper, cardboard. You're not often restricted by the surface, whereas pastels, soft pastels, will need on the whole a paper surface. Right, this is where you're going to see some contamination. It's quite difficult to push the orange up to the green of the leaf without it picking up. So I think I'm going to go back to my blender, just push the orange pigment in. It's so difficult. Go on, be brave, get up there.
Anita?
Yes?
Another question from me, sorry.
That's all right.
We haven't done oil pastels a lot.
No.
Does the oil leach into the paper or anything like that?
No. I when I first started, you see the word oil pastels, you go, that can't be used on paper without it leaching. No, because there's a lot of wax, so it is pretty much a wax-based pastel with an oil, a bit of oil binder, which is non-drying. So no, they don't leach into the paper. It is a question I've asked, and it is a question I've researched, because oil bars, which are different, they are oil paint. Again, because of the amount of oil in the bar, they are a little bit more versatile than oil paints. Oil paints are runny and they have a lot more of that oil, and when you put it on paper it leaches and you get those halos. Oil bars, not oil pastels, can work okay on paper, but you still run the risk of leaching because they are predominantly a linseed oil. But these, no, they are perfectly suitable for multiple surfaces. You can see here, not leaching at all. I've done a polar bear and that's not moved at all.
I remember the polar bear.
Remember the polar bear. Right, if I can get this. This is the thing that takes the time. Okay, because I don't want halos. Oh, I do want the colour to be, because the leaf is coming over the orange. So I do want it to, it's going now. Okay. So sometimes, like I say, with these blenders, they get a little bit contaminated. So this would have orange in it, you can see here. And it's not always what you're looking for. You want a clean area. So we can do is gently with a knife just clean off the outer paper. And you then clean your stump. Where's my lid? You can wipe it off on a kitchen roll, but sometimes that just doesn't get rid of it, and you just keep shaving these down. Right, so I need a little bit of shading, a bit of red, not too much, a bit of red around here. too yellow. So a bit more orange in here. Oops. Scumbling it on. So this technique, this round circular technique is called scumbling. You can also blend, as I'm just doing here, colour over colour. So you don't have to use your blender. You can do colour over colour. Just trying to keep that texture, and I know if I keep putting a lot of colour on, it will disappear. Right. So let's just add some shading. So this leaf, that one there, a bit of shadow here. And under here, I don't think I'm going to blend this in. I'm quite like that texture I'm creating. Because luckily I haven't squished down the texture too much of the paper. So I'm getting enough texture for this layer. Bring this up a bit. Again, try and get rid of those halos. Still got white halo. I'm looking at the shape. I want to create a rounded shape of the orange. So it's coming up from here. Right. Just a little bit more orange here. Don't know why I'm worried about the shape, because oranges aren't perfectly circular. Blending again till I'm happy. So if I do get some of the green into the orange, it's perfectly easy to just go over with a lighter colour. Right. I may have gone a bit too hard with the brown, so it's really pushed the orange back. There we go, that orange is coming back now. Around here. I can always bit of the yellow. Right. White, where's my white? I'm leaving this to, I'm going to, bit of yellow. I want to create some dimples. Dimpling. Sorry if that's affecting the mic.
Sound like a woodpecker.
Woodpecker. It's dimples. I'm creating dimples. A little bit of not so hard because it's a stronger colour. I know what's bothering me more is this. I need to feel happy with that now. A bit more shadow under here. A little bit more This red's quite bright, so I do have to be a little bit conservative with it. And I know I didn't want to contaminate with green, but I think a little bit of green in it will tie it together. I think a little bit of shadow around here, and the green is working perfectly for that. Okay. Right, so where was I dimpling? Dimples. It's just adding texture. Bit of brown. And good old white. So, have to be quite heavy with this. Where's the light hitting? Let's just push this, make that a little bit more even blended into. That's better. So that has kind of pushed this leaf forward a little bit and cleaned it up. This one still needs blending in. I saw that. If I put too much white on, it's going to just blend. I do want to lighten some areas up. Right, so let's just blend that in. That's got rid of that halo, and it's cleaned up the leaves. Right. Just have a little bit of black. I'm not going to blend it in, but I want to just add a little bit of definition here and there. And same with the white. Just along the edge. So if my white is contaminated, I can clean it up by running it along the kitchen roll. Now, depending on which brand you have, you can peel off, and they have little markers along the edge, and you peel off a little bit at a time. Don't think these do it, so I'm going to just peel off a little bit like that. So I know others you can peel off a little bit at a time. Oh, look at that. Right, what was I doing this white edge? Right, so that is a floating orange. What I did notice, great chance to use the blues and the purples, is that they are also in these little trays, I suppose, which have little circles for the hollows for the oranges. So I'm going to just suggest that, and the reason I'm putting white down is because I know how strong the purple's going to be. Right, so need to create a shadow under this one because it needs to be sitting in something. So it's sitting in one of those hollows. This will be the darkest part, and it will get lighter as it comes out a little bit. Again, which end is clean, we'll see. Try and create a different texture to the orange. So this is going to be quite smooth. Using the edge. Making sure I'm going up to the orange so the orange isn't isolated, it is all part of. And I don't mind if a little bit of the orange colour comes into the shadow. And you can see why I put the white down first. That's dirty. Let's put a bit of, not too much. Because I really want just to suggest these hollows. And because it's on a white base, it's blending with the white and it's not as strong. Go back in again, suggesting these hollows. So you can use oil pastels quite simply, lots of just colour without blending. Or as you can see here, that's the reason I've gone and I've showed you this. I want to show you how painterly they can be, because they're sometimes just seen as a mixed media or a student medium, when actually they have lots of more qualities than they're given credit for. A bit of grey. Grey along here. The edge isn't sharp, so let's blend that in. See how little I needed, because it's such a strong colour. But hopefully that's suggested that there's hollows there. Again, let's bring that up. Let's be white. Just picking up colour. It's probably because I've got a few crumbles. So as you're working with it, there's probably a bit of crumbled colour on the surface. Don't matter, it will blend in. I don't want them to be so hard. I want it as a suggestion, so. Just so it doesn't have a completely white surface, and I can add fabulous colours like purple and blue. Let's have some blue. Again, careful, because it's quite strong. That's beautiful. Also, by adding blue, I'm using, and the purple, using complementary colours. I like a lot of colour and a lot of brightness, which is why I've chosen an orange in my painting. And using complementary colours helps to add to this. So blue and orange, colours that are opposite each other on the colour chart. Purple and green, they work with each other. Just blend here and maybe take a little bit of colour up there, and I'm probably getting near to finishing. Just think I need to ground that a little bit more. Could darken in there. Bit of colour up here. And that just looks like a line, same here. Soften that a bit because it shouldn't be as harsh. Do that with the white. Bit of blue in there. I can keep going for ages doing this, and I'm not going to. I am very close to finishing. I think I have enough information here to be able to say stop. Okay. Right. Final outline. That's probably a better one, just so I've got a nice shape to the orange. Leaning. So now I've done this, I can use this crystal paper to lean on, and it's not so sticky. Where's that black? It has to be the darkest. Just gives it something to make sure it's sitting and not floating. Right, touch here. I'm going to keep that, like I said before, use that crayon-like texture. Last touches of white. Do that with something else in my hand. I think that works pretty well. So, showing you the Caran NeoPastels, oil pastels. Like I said, they don't dry. They're a non-drying formula. You can, which is what I'm going to do, is just use a bit of the crystal paper. So when I'm storing, you put behind glass if you're displaying, making sure you've got a mount or mat around, or there are fixatives specifically for oil pastels which harden the pastel enough that it doesn't smudge easily, but they don't dry. But I've had paintings on the wall that behind glass for years. So just think about, this is the easiest way of protecting bit of crystal paper. You'll find I've been finding lots of uses for crystal paper in recent weeks. And I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you for watching, and join me again next week for another live demonstration.